Guys, I've got a good one today. Today I bring on the one and only Daniel Erichsen, sleep physician turned founder of the Sleep Coach School. Daniel might have helped more people overcome insomnia than anyone else. He certainly helped me overcome my own insomnia for good. Today I brought him on to discuss the possibility that there are insomnias that are brought about by something physiological. You've heard me and likely heard Daniel discuss how insomnia is caused by developing a fear or some sort of negative association around being awake at night, and that we're trying to fight it through the use of any number of means such as sleep hygiene, sleep supplements, etc., and how that only exacerbates the problem. But could there be some insomnias that are brought about entirely by something physiological? The possibility of a physiological cause insomnia is a big concern that I see a lot of people have. So I really wanted to bring him on as somebody who has not only a lot more experience than I do as an insomnia coach, but also somebody who has a background in medical science, specifically, like I said before, as a sleep physician. How many people has he seen who has had some sort of physiological based insomnia? Daniel was a great guest with a lot of great insights that I think will be important for a lot of people. So without further ado, here's my talk with Daniel. Daniel, welcome to the program. Welcome to Insomnia to Peace. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, super nice being here, John. Look forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, so Daniel, this is something that I always go back and forth on. I know we've talked about this a little bit here and there, and I see so many people bring this up to me, and I see it in online discussions all the time. The question of, is insomnia ever caused or persisted by anything physiological, and if so, how often? Because looking online, it looks like there's so many different types of insomnia. Apparently, we have secondary insomnia, which the textbook definition is anything caused by anything neurological or physiological based. There's idiopathic insomnia, insomnia starting from childhood, and then there's a psychophysiological insomnia, which is what people might refer to our approach as the fix of. And I'm tempted to say something along the lines of, or I'm tempted to agree with this line of thought, because hey, the human body is extremely complicated. If something as fundamental as, say, diet could have, or digestion could have a million things wrong with it, then so could, in theory, something like sleep. And in theory, it totally makes sense. I could definitely see a physiological explanation for a long-term lack of sleep. However, and this is why I wanted to bring you on, because not only are you classically trained as a sleep physician, but you've also been doing insomnia work for 6-7 years. So I wanted to see, by the numbers, what do we actually see in the real world?
Yeah. I think this is a very, very helpful topic to cover. So very, very excited about talking about this. And and I have several things I want to share, but maybe just so much sure I'm not missing anything. When you said by the numbers, what do we see in the real world? What exactly was that question?
Yeah, so I mean, you've helped out hundreds or thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands at this point, have come to you to help to ask you for your assistance in overcoming insomnia. So I figured, you've got a large database of, maybe you haven't published any white papers on this sort of stuff, but you have tons of anecdotal evidence. And I'm just curious what you have seen so far. I mean, you might have helped more people overcome insomnia than anyone else. So I guess statistically, meaning that's what I'm trying to mean by when I say by the numbers.
Yeah. Now I understand it. And I think, I mean, it is true. I think I've personally interacted with thousands of people who've left the struggle or was on the journey of leaving the struggle. And I think, we've reached many more people than that. And, and to answer the question here, I would actually make what can seem like a brave statement right away, which is that the way I see it, there's no such thing as a an external factor causing insomnia. Now that made a statement, I'm gonna back it up and discuss it so it
Sure.
becomes more clear. If you look at, let's say, the mainstream definition of insomnia, which is the one I was taught when I was going through my training as a sleep doctor, then this is true. Then using the mainstream definition of insomnia, there can be countless causes for insomnia. And the mainstream definition of insomnia goes something like this. If you've had trouble staying asleep or falling asleep for more than 3 times per week for more than 3 months, you have chronic insomnia. And if the same is true, but for just like less than 3 months, you have acute insomnia.
Mhm.
And now as you can tell, this definition of insomnia is purely descriptive and it's completely subjective. It's basically just somebody describing what they're going through without any objective measures, and that can be called insomnia. So, for example, if you work shifts, if you work, 4 days out of the week, you work some kind of like odd shift, and you therefore have trouble falling asleep and staying asleep. Theoretically, you could say that you have insomnia. Uh, But that is completely different from what we in our space, in our kind of like ecosystem, mean when we say the word insomnia. When we say insomnia, we're talking about somebody who's caught up in this like inner struggle and battle. This is somebody who is like confused and scared and doesn't understand what's going on, and essentially is is in the struggle because their brain has like misclassified not sleeping as a threat, right? So then we have a loop. If we think that not sleeping is a threat, then when we sleep little, we'll become, more stressed and more anxious and worried, and then we'll sleep less, and then we'll think that's a threat, et cetera, et cetera. This is what we call insomnia. So to get to the point here is that in my world, in the way I teach, in my framework, we define insomnia as only resulting from the mislabeling of not sleeping as a threat. That's the only cause for what we call insomnia, this ongoing self-perpetuating a struggle, this state of like, my insomnia has a life of its own, like my sleep struggle has a life of its own. That's insomnia, right?
Mhm.
And we look at anything else that disturbs or disrupts our sleep, we call a sleep disruption. So, for example, if you have like some undiagnosed, gut issue, or you have like, some hormonal imbalance or something like that, and that is leading you to have more choppy sleep, takes a little longer to fall asleep, or you wake up more often or something like that, that is a sleep disruption. That is not insomnia. And that's how you can reconcile the truths, which is that there are countless things that can impact our sleep, but there's only one thing that causes insomnia. And so we have made it easy for ourselves by defining insomnia as a struggle that comes from misclassifying not sleeping as a threat.
Mhm.
So I'll just pause there to kind of let you ask follow-up questions, and then we can talk about like these definitions, like these diagnosed codes of like idiopathic insomnia and secondary insomnia, etc.
Sure. So I'm wondering, I'm curious, like how often does somebody come by the insomnia immunity program and their lack of sleep is maybe they don't have insomnia, but they have some, to your example, a gut disturbance or something like that, something that's actually causing them to consistently not get sleep over an extended period of time that is caused by the body. How often do you see that happening?
Yeah, I would say that again, we are not a diagnostic, center, or we are not a
Sure.
professional call. We're just here to help support and educate people who have had a concern about their sleep. But to answer your question, in my mind, it has never happened. Like it's 0%. It's like zero. I've never encountered a student or follower who has like completely misunderstood their own sleep struggle as something that was rooted in, fear, worry, concern, mislabeling of threat, rather than some kind of clearly defined medical condition. And the reason I think that is that I've never had a student or follower or client who hasn't been concerned about their sleep, right? Everybody who joins me by default is worried about their sleep. So
Hmm.
even if there is some kind of medical issue that causes sleep disruption, there's also this kind of labeling of that as a threat.
Yeah, and that's something that I was thinking about as I was getting ready to interview you is, let's say that you do have some mysterious physiological thing going on with your body that's causing you to not get the sleep that you want. In that process of overcoming that, you're almost certainly going to also develop this fear of wakefulness and anxiety around sleep and being awake at night. So it kind of makes sense that we should take that this individual should take steps to mitigate that the root cause of the sleep anxiety that they've developed.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And that leads to actually very a place that's much easier to be in. It leads to a place where, yes, you may have a little bit of disrupted sleep, or quite a lot of disrupted sleep, depending on what's going on with you and outside of insomnia. But the insomnia isn't there, right? So even if you have like for some reason it's like you wake up a lot or you have choppy sleep, but you're not concerned about that, that is miles away from like the insomnia struggle. That's a much more peaceful and easy place to be in. And I'm just going to add one more thing to that, which is that I encourage everyone who's concerned about their health to, talk to their doctor and uh, and investigate their health and follow whatever recommendations the doctor has. And we often refer to that as the investigative stage, the stage where we kind of like, go through our doctor, do the examinations to make sure there's kind of no obvious medical condition that we're missing. Now, with that said, uh, when I hear somebody who's like, "Oh, I have like like the mysterious gut issue or the mysterious neurological thing, the weird health thing that nobody can understand," to me, I think that in all likelihood, this is just another version of the inner struggle, right? This is just another version of things we can experience when our mind is in this like threatened state. To just use one example, the gut issues, like if we are like worried and scared, we often have like loose stools, diarrhea, like bloating and things of that
Yeah.
nature. Very, very common, right? And we can also change our behavior to some kind of withholding behavior where we can have like constipation on the other hand. So like gut issues very often are seen in the threatened state. So for those out there who are hearing this and are like, I have these all these mysterious health issues, talk to your doctor, make sure there's nothing obvious medical thing, but if the medical system can't explain it, very often the explanation is like it's the exact same process as insomnia, just like with a focus on some other part of our health.
Yeah, so it sounds like we can categorize any of those mysterious or annoying physiological symptoms, if it's again something with your gut, in the same family as in the same sort of problem as, let's say, you have the next door neighbor who decides to start doing construction work at 4 o'clock in the morning. That is, I mean, they're both sleep disturbances, and it's not going to be pleasant. It's going to be annoying. Like, really, I can't sleep because my next door neighbor is banging away at his hammer. But as somebody who was annoyed by that before I had insomnia, that is certainly a completely different thing from the insomnia struggle. As somebody who's personally gone through both, and there have been times when I would have physiological causes of insomnia. So, for example, pain. If I was injured before I had insomnia, then that would wake me up, frequently throughout the night. But insomnia is a completely different thing. Much, much
Yeah.
worse. Much more devious.
Yeah. I never struggled with insomnia, as you know, but I remember I fell with my bike one time and I landed on my ribs and that side of my rib cage was really sore for like weeks and I didn't sleep well at all. And then I was thinking about that, like, oh my gosh, this is like my sleep is really disrupted. And it was hard to fall asleep and I woke up a lot and it was sore and things of that nature. But there was no struggle. There was no fear around that, right? So it was annoying, but it was pure sleep disruption, which is like so much easier to deal with than the inner struggle.
Oh yeah, yeah. But fortunately, the good news is, as awful of a result as the inner struggle is, it's also seems to be much more malleable. using the approach that we can work with it a lot more. Now it is still difficult, of course, but we can at least. I find it reassuring that that would be the case. If I was somebody watching this and I was dealing with a long-term lack of sleep, I would find it reassuring that it could be treated, that inner struggle could be treated using the practices that we talk about in our programs. So I would find that to be really reassuring. But I know you wanted to circle back to secondary insomnia and idiopathic insomnia. It sounded like you had some other things that you wanted to touch on there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you mentioned those like the terminology before, so I thought we might, touch on that again for the audience. So
Mhm,
in again the mainstream world, you will come across wording like idiopathic insomnia,
mhm,
and that is like, as you said, it's another kind of descriptive definition where if you go to a sleep doctor, for example, and you say like, oh, I've had trouble sleeping for my entire life, like since I was a child,
mhm,
then they may very well say like, oh, then you have idiopathic insomnia. But again, just like the general mainstream definition of insomnia, it doesn't tell you at all why and why is this the case. The same thing with idiopathic insomnia. It doesn't say anything about like why. In fact, the name idiopathic or the word idiopathic is used when something is kind of like unknown. So idiopathic insomnia kind of means like unknown insomnia,
mhm,
which I think is like not very helpful. I think what we want is to understand what we've been going through. So to me, it, when somebody describes having had a struggle with sleep since childhood, I don't think that's strange or unusual, and it's not that uncommon either. I think that the most common story I hear is that they were told from a very early age by their parents that they couldn't sleep, that, oh, you were a bad sleeper from the beginning, you were such a poor sleeper, you couldn't fall asleep, you couldn't stay asleep, like that was, and then that formed like an identity within a child where almost like this threat of not sleeping was like embedded in their brain by the parents, like it's hard being a parent and you try your best, right? And it's like this is not like with ill intention, but often like with unfortunately, like the way the parents describe their child as a young, in a young age, that child can get this idea that they have some problem with their sleep, and it becomes like sleep, there's kind of this threat around sleeping build up as a child, and then they struggle with sleep for forever, right? So I think that's a more helpful way to understand that, rather than just saying like, oh, you have idiopathic insomnia, right?
mhm,
And psychophysiological insomnia is very, yeah, I would say yes. It's kind of like it's close to how we define insomnia. Like the
mhm,
story of psychophysiological insomnia is kind of like, you know, that you go through something stressful in your life, and then you start changing your behavior around sleep, and then becomes that there's a lot of overlap between like psychophysiological insomnia and how we define insomnia. And it's not, I don't think it's exactly the same, but there's a lot of overlap. And then, yeah, chronic insomnia we talked about already. It's just like it's like an arbitrary timeline. Somebody decided that more than 3 months is chronic, less than 3 months is acute. So again, in summary, I would say like the tricky thing with the mainstream definition of insomnia is that it's just descriptive rather than telling you about like why you have this struggle and what's going on.
mm. Do you think that I'm curious if you think people who are flat out convinced that their lack of sleep is caused by something physiological, that might be, as we're having this discussion, I wonder if that might be the biggest barrier, the biggest obstacle to people overcoming insomnia, way more so than the act of dealing with the fear that they've developed of wakefulness. Because I wonder if somebody is flat out convinced that, oh, my issue is caused by, I don't know, I took some
Thyroid, we can say like thyroid issues. We can say just to have
thyroid
something
issues.
working.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, what's this Daniel Erichsen guy talking about? Oh, he's talking about anxiety. Oh, that's not my thing. I'm not even going to bother reaching out and even trying this guy's method. And after seeing all just from that hypothetical situation and from what I see online, where people, I mean, if you just look on Reddit, these people are when some of these people are 100% convinced that their issue is again something caused by their body, and they're trying out, they've got this a list of dozens of things that they've tried out. It's become their lifelong journey in a sense. And wouldn't it just be tragic if all these people were absolutely 100% just on a wild fucking goose chase?
Yeah, I think it's very unfortunate. I think it's very, very sad. To imagine that people are like really struggling year in, year out because they are, they are in this like threatened that the loop of like they see not sleeping as a threat, they're chasing it, they're trying to fix it, and that becomes like reinforcing, et cetera, et cetera. Absolutely. Now, the the one thing I want to add there is that in an odd kind of like plot twist, it in some way doesn't matter what you believe if you are like not arguing with that belief. Meaning, let's just do the third example and say that somebody we come across is like 100% convinced that they have some kind of thyroid dysfunction that is causing them to like not be able to sleep, right? Well, on one hand, I think that that belief is kind of tricky because you sort of think something is wrong with you, something's not the way it should be, and it easily leads to you like trying to fix it and creating sleep efforts. And what we know is like the more you try to sleep, the less you sleep, etc. So it can be tricky. On the other hand, if we imagine somebody who says, "Yeah, I'm 100% convinced. Like I'm not even like convinced. I know for sure that my sleep issues are caused by my thyroid." And I tried to manage my thyroid as well as I could, but now there's nothing I can do. It's the way things are just the way they are, right? There's nothing I can do.
That's
Then
very
that person paradoxically wouldn't actually struggle with sleep because they would stop like worrying and trying to fix it, you know?
They've made their
So
peace with it.
yeah, yeah. So oddly, it's like you can be convinced that your sleep issues are due to some physiological thing. And if you're okay with that and you like accept that as truth and you don't struggle with it, then you're gonna sleep just fine.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that one before. That's interesting.
Because the thing is that if somebody says like I'm convinced this physiological issue is causing my sleep problems, well then they're probably actually like there's still an element of non-acceptance. They're still not accepted that okay, this is the way it's going to be, and I can't do anything about my physiological health issue, so therefore I can't do anything about sleep. And they're still like in the struggle. They're still like, yeah, it's caused by this physiological thing, and I have to fix that. I have to do something about that. And they're still kind of in this like chasing, monitoring, trying state, right? But if they just accept that as reality, they wouldn't struggle actually.
Yeah, yeah, true, very true. And something that I also wanted to point out to other people who might be having this exact situation. If there was legitimacy to long-term sleep, some sort of mysterious long-term sleep disruption that's physiologically based, and that's the eternal curse of their life. You know, although the sleep coach school hasn't published any white papers, we do have studies done to measure the effectiveness of ACTI or even CBTI. And these are purely psychological based solutions. And it seems like the majority of the people involved in those studies seem to respond positively to them. So you would think that, again, statistically speaking, that if the majority of these people are benefiting from these psychological based solutions. Now I know that CBTI has some other longer term, it might not be ideal for as a long term solution, but you would think if for all these so many millions of mysterious things that could go wrong with our body, you would think that we do have evidence that psychologically taking these psychological approaches do seem to be fruitful for most people. Now, unfortunately, that does run into the tricky situation where every single person watching this is going to think, well, yeah, but I'm the 5% that doesn't apply to. Every single person is the absolute special case. I mean, you don't have insomnia, unless you think that you're the special case. I feel like, but yeah, wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, yeah. I will say that I haven't actually like done a thorough review of the like ACT or ACT, literature when it comes to insomnia. But I will say that what I believe to be true is that like it's supportive. Like the studies that are out there and published are supportive of like ACT, for example, and CBT. There are a lot of studies that show that CBT is helpful for insomnia. Now the CBT or CBTI, I'm honestly very skeptical about big aspects of that approach, and honestly also the literature around that, because when you see the headline, it's like, oh, 80% responded well to CBTI, right? It looks like really great.
Yeah.
Um, but then when you look at the paper itself, when you start like, you read the method section, you read the results section, etc., you're like, oh, what they measured was like sleep efficiency, which is like how much of the time in bed that was spent sleeping, and the sleep efficiency went up from like, 72% to 76%, and they defined that as like success. And oftentimes when we read these papers, there's the subject didn't get a chance to say anything. It was like all these like objective markers of like their sleep quality, like how long it takes them to fall asleep, et cetera, et cetera. And when I read that, I'm like, yeah, but this person who has like 3% higher sleep efficiency might be even more scared now and maybe more anxious. And so
Yeah.
that's a big problem, I think, with the CBT literature.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who has gone through all of the above, CBTI was, I almost put CBTI in the same category as the latest pill to take, the latest supplement. It's like where the drug, instead of introducing a chemical to my body that was allegedly going to, make it all go away, the game to play was now preserving and cherishing my sleep drive. That was the golden standard for me. It's like, oh, my sleep drive is now very sensitive, or rather, I need for whatever reason, ever since I've developed this whole fear of being awake thing, which I didn't even know that I had until you articulated that to me. For whatever reason, my body just needs an outrageous amount of sleep drive. So that's going to be my fix for this whole insomnia thing, is to make sure that I do not spend more than 6 hours, or at the very most 6.5 hours in bed. And now, I mean, now that I'm a year and a half into recovery, I don't follow that at all. I don't manage that. I don't manage my sleep drive. I don't manage my sleep hygiene. In theory, my sleep should be a complete and total nightmare. From the way I go to bed anytime from 10 o'clock to 10:30. I'm drinking coffee up until 5 o'clock in the evening. I'm not really doing anything. I don't do a single thing to help preserve my sleep. And yeah, it's just, it unfortunately, it's so well intentioned, but it creates a lot of confusing noise for somebody who's still in the struggle.
Yeah, no, you named so many issues with the mainstream approach now, and for anyone out there who's done CBTI and it's been helpful, that's wonderful. I always think it's nice that there are alternatives to like just the pills, the drugs, the supplements, et cetera, et cetera. But there's some tricky things with CBTI. But then going back to your point though about like how we can look at literature and somehow kind of refute the idea that your your real struggle with sleep is like purely physiological. There's a lot of literature there I think is helpful. One particular study that came in mind, and now I don't have the name of the author or anything right now, but anyone who goes to ChatGPT or something can find it. But
I'll
anyway,
edit it in I'll put a pretty logo or something that says,
yeah, maybe we can find it and put it in the description or something. But
yeah.
one study that I thought was really neat was one they had they asked women who were in menopause or perimenopause if they had any like um if their sleep had been affected, by the hot flashes and the hormonal changes, everything that's going on. And the response rate, like the percentage who said yes was something like 97%. So essentially, every single woman going through menopause had like, their sleep was affected by this, right? And then they asked, like, do you think that there's a problem with your sleep? And, that you have a problem with your sleep. And the women who said yes was something like a little more than 30%. And that to me was really interesting because it showcases how among that 30%, we will find like the people the women who have insomnia because they not only have like the physiological impact of menopause on their sleep, they think it's a problem. They think I shouldn't sleep this way. This kind of like threatening picture around sleep has developed for them, and they will have insomnia. Versus the other, like let's say 60%, they have disrupted sleep, but they don't consider it a problem. And I'm sure that will play out when it comes to any type of health issue. If you ask like people with like heart failure, like, oh, has this impacted your sleep? Probably like almost 100% would say yes. Do you think this is a problem, or you have a problem with your sleep, or something is wrong with your sleep? 30% will say yes, right? So again, it showcases that it is how we think about things that determine whether we will like struggle with sleep or we'll just have some disruptive sleep.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing the follow-up numbers on that. If how quickly the people in those studies reverted back to good quality, consistent sleep, and like the people that probably didn't have see much of an issue with it, probably returned back to good quality sleep faster than the 30% who thought that there's some sort of problem. Because I could easily see the people in the 30% category start to take action against it and do the same things that we're all familiar with, looking up the supplements, looking up the trying to find the exact meditation mantra to make sleep happen and stuff. And it's unfortunate that trying to research more about sleep just in general in terms of the human race, trying to learn more about this really important thing, and that we've kind of, in a lot of ways, I feel like we've shot ourselves in the foot by doing this well-intentioned thing, trying to learn more about it and say like, oh, this thing can help improve, a melatonin has been shown to objectively improve sleep. You could find anyone listening to this right now can easily find a lot of peer-reviewed, good quality papers that say, yes, melatonin improves sleep quality or duration, whatever it is. But unfortunately, that doesn't make a lick of difference for somebody who has insomnia, because it's not addressing that unhealthy relationship that they've developed with it.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Like, the vast majority of everything you read about sleep in, let's say, mainstream media or blogs or in social media, whatever it is, will tell you like, oh, try this thing, this will fix it, this is the cure, and not not addressing the root cause, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
100%. It's really unfortunate.
Well, one other thing I wanted to touch on is the scariest fact that people in this struggle often come across are these two scary things, FFI and SFI. Now, we know that is like more of a unique case of I know that it's labeled insomnia, but there's a whole lot of it might be a little bit of a misnomer, because there's a whole lot of awful neurological conditions that go along with it that are, it seems like, again, I don't have any medical training, but it seems to be really similar to aspects of dementia or Alzheimer's, or I mean, I'm sure a ton of awful stuff. Maybe you could speak to that, but I think it also that greatly highlights this really scary thing can also heighten people's fear, and they say, oh, there is evidence that this awful physiological thing can disrupt people's sleep. Now, granted, it doesn't matter what the number is. If it's, I think there's only 70 cases globally or something like that for both of them. Whatever it is, it's really a drop in the bucket. Doesn't make a lick of difference to somebody who's so fearful because they think, again, I'm the special case. This is me. And then it also goes to if they're smart, They know that, well, we don't know everything about sleep, so maybe what I have isn't this recognized FFI or SFI, but this also, maybe it's, I have this unique one in a trillion thing that has yet to be recognized or diagnosed. I mean, I'm trying out all these different things and it's not making a lick of difference.
Yeah, yeah, that concern is definitely out there. It's actually a very common one. And for for the familial fatal insomnia, it's it's pretty easy to know that you don't have that because it's a dominant, like an autosomally dominant inherited condition. So, your mom or dad would have it, and in that family, one, out of two would have it, right? So if you don't know anybody who had it in your family, you don't.
Yeah.
Now, the sporadic kind is, like the one that typically people are really scared about because they think like, oh, I've gotten this mutation, and like you said, it's actually quite similar to like mad cow disease or prion diseases, and dementias as well. But I would say that, when people have this concern, I would also always point out that it's not insomnia. Like that is a misnomer. Insomnia again is when our sleep struggle is driven by fear of not sleeping. And for people who comment on the YouTube channel or talk to me about this, I often point out that you have an obvious reason. You have a very, very obvious reason for not sleeping, for being up all night, to have like jerks and jitters and all these things, which is you're super scared, right? You're really, really scared. And that is an obvious cause for not sleeping. And and also point out that when you look at the literature on sporadic insomnia, there's no mention really of a sleep struggle, right? And I had come to this conclusion by just looking at the literature. But then we had a guest, his name is Casper, who talked about his mom, who actually is one of the very few people on the planet who was diagnosed with SFI and passed away because of SFI. And when he hears story, he confirms that his mom was never like scared of not sleeping, right? She didn't do anything to sleep. She wasn't worried about not sleeping. In fact, there was very little like fear in her story at all. It was just like her mental capacity just kind of like it just waned quite quickly. Uh, and also, it's not really like it's not insomnia as in like a person with SFI or FFI stop sleeping. It is just that there's such a deterioration in the brain, in the central nervous system, that you no longer can easily determine whether that person is asleep or not. It's sort of like a 7-day-old baby, right? They just like they make sounds and they move their eyes, they open their eyes, they close their eyes, they move around. Are they sleeping or not? Hard to tell by observing them. If you put an
Yeah.
EEG on their brain, also hard to tell because the brain is so immature, right? So it's like it's unclear if they're sleeping or not, or even if we can define sleep in that type of brain. And that's kind of the case with SFI, that it's not like the person stops sleeping. It's just that it becomes hard to like define sleep in a brain that is that much damaged. And I can maybe final point on this, like maybe two more points. One is I always tell people who are on my YouTube channel and they go like, I'm afraid I have SFI. I always say like, talk to your doctor, no medical advice here. But in my understanding, if you have the kind of cognitive ability to worry that you have SFI and you're able to write a sentence like, I'm afraid that I have SFI, you are functioning way high. You're at a way higher level of functioning than anyone who has SFI. Like, so that's just proof that it's not it. And finally, to the person who's like, well, maybe I have like this condition that has yet to be recognized, an unknown condition.
Hmm.
Uh, well, like we can always come up with a reason that our situation is really, really rare and special. Like when we're concerned about something, our brain can construct a scenario like that one, right? And how can we meet that? Well, in a way, it becomes similar to what we talked about before, that if we think we have a yet undiscovered medical condition that is causing us not to sleep, then then it's not that in itself that leads us to struggle. The struggle comes from thinking like all the uncertainty and all the investigating, all the monitoring, all the like, oh, I have this, maybe I don't, maybe I do have, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. If we would be like, yeah, I do have this yet undiscovered medical condition that is causing not to sleep, and there's nothing to do about that because it's not no doctor can find it, nobody can treat it, nobody can do anything about it. So where does that lead us? It leads to acceptance. It leads to like, well, then what can I do? I can just do what I can to enjoy my day. I mean, maybe be kind to myself, make things a little easier for me, and that becomes the path to where you want to be, right? So
Mm,
uh, paradoxically, like the regardless of what we believe or think, it's like the answer always becomes something of like acceptance and non-striving and non-achievement. It helps kind of regardless of our what our ideas are.
yeah, that's a good point. And it makes you wonder that when you hear these people talk about these things, like I think about, I have this awful thing with my body that's preventing me from sleeping ever. It's, I guess, looking at it that way, it's almost as if that they haven't accepted that that's the case. It's almost like there's a part of them that's like going back and forth, like, do I really have this? Do I not? I guess I don't know for sure. Which is the other part of the physiological stuff going down this wild goose chase, is that these people do not know for sure if the human body is so complicated, and you're seeking every single medical specialist on the planet and you're not getting the results that you want. It's like maybe that's doing you more. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that somehow you can say that the point you're making here is that it's really the uncertainty, the
Yes.
ambiguity. That's what really causes like so much difficulty, rather than the conviction that they have something or not. Because as you said, they're not really convinced. They're like still trying to disprove it or wondering if that can really be the case. And ultimately, I think that that's kind of like that's beyond like health anxiety is like the uncertainty about our health when that becomes like threatening to us when we think like I shouldn't be uncertain about my health, that leads to health anxiety, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, and nobody has certainty about their health, right? If somebody asked me like, "Hey Daniel, how do you know how's your pancreas working today? Like, how are your kidneys?" I have no idea, right?
Yeah.
And this uncertainty to me is completely acceptable, right? So um, kind of befriending uncertainty and going towards like embracing uncertainty, knowing and take note of the fact that uncertainty is part of life. It can be really really helpful when it comes to what we just discussed and life in general, I think.
Yeah. It's something I just realized as you were saying that is, you know, what could another factor could be, another psychological factor that could be strengthening these people's belief that they have some medical condition, or that maybe acceptance is the wrong way to go about it, is because the branding that we've established with modern day medical science, which people are under the impression that it's the most advanced thing in the world. And certainly, of course, we've come a very long way from, caveman times. There's amazing things that we can do. And some, I'm sure that, again, some things that we're currently doing that isn't so great. But the important thing is that people are under the impression that, okay, well, I'm going to it's the highest possible authority on the planet. We have, a medical doctor who went through 25 years of school, whatever, some absurd amount of training, whatever, and we have this bulletproof list of scientific data, yada yada. And on the other side, we have this thing called acceptance. Oh, the same thing that I see in every single $5 self-help book at the airport. So therefore, how wishy-washy and vague and new agey and borderline spiritual, easy to be a huckster in, versus this bulletproof ivory tower of no bullshit. Of course, people are going to be, and that's what I did. That's why if you came at me with the sleep coach school at the start of my struggle, I would have easily put in the woo woo bin right off the bat for starters. And so it's just another psychological obstacle that somebody has to overcome in order to actually go about this in the right way, which is really unfortunate. Yeah. And any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just that I think what you're saying is very, very true. And if you think about so much of what we enjoy in life today in terms of like, material comfort and, this, like we're talking over Zoom, like in two different states, and like
Yeah.
these are amazing things. And I think to a great degree they are the product of this kind of like m- you know the scientific approach, right? Like trying this, experimenting, measuring, monitoring, like, and it has led us to amazing results. And I think that's true in the medical field as well. Like hepatitis C can now be cured, which was not true when I was in med school. That's amazing. In so many aspects of medicine has like really like things have really evolved in an amazing way.
Hmm.
Now, what I think the tricky part is that in the Western world and maybe the entire world really, we've tried to deploy that same method towards like what we have defined as mental illness, right? Let's say anxiety. We think that okay, anxiety is probably it's an illness, it's a disorder. We define it as such. We're like, oh, if you felt this way for so long, then you have anxiety. You have an anxiety disorder. Okay, then the establishment has tried to be like, okay, let's treat this. Let's try to figure out what the problem is the same way we do with, hepatitis C, which is that we do blood tests, we do surveys, we measure, we try to control, we try this, we try that, which, and when it comes to this kind of like these inner struggles, like it's completely opposite. It's like the more you try to fix it and understand it and monitoring, the more it appears to be a problem, and the more afraid of it we become, and the more we struggle. So the in a weird way, like the exact like approach that has been incredibly fruitful for humanity leads us just to more struggle and more misinformation, more confusion when it comes to these like this like inner struggle type scenario, right? So I think that's also behind a lot of this like a lot of the confusion and a lot of why like in many aspects like the ivory tower mainstream medicine is actually amazing, but when it comes to what I think honestly is like maybe the greatest challenge for humanity, which is the various aspects of the inner struggle, it's not that amazing. That's a tricky thing, but I'm optimistic. I think eventually we'll come to realize this as a as a human tribe, and things will get easier for all of us.
I think so too. It's probably going to take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. But until then, I think that for anyone watching this who might be dealing with these exact sort of questions, I think that this was, or I hope that the stuff that we talked about was fruitful or helpful for them in some way to maybe, hopefully give them pause that, maybe I might want to give up this wild goose chase, or maybe I want to at least try out the approach that we go over at Sleep Coach School and Insomnia to Peace, and I, I don't think it could do any real harm to at least try that out. And but yeah, I really thank you for taking your time to come on the channel and talk about this stuff. I think this was very important. This is an issue that I run into all the time, and I know for a fact that you run into all the time. So it's really great to have somebody who's been doing this for a lot longer than I have to get their thoughts on this. And couldn't think of a better person to have on the channel to talk about that exact topic.
Anytime, John. It's super nice talking, and I also hope you'll bring a lot of value to the community.
Yeah. All right. Well, until next time, everyone. Thanks for coming by the channel and listening to us talk shop. And yeah, see you around. Bye, everyone.